express our sorrow and send our condolences to the Williams Lake Chief Willie Sellers and to the community of Williams Lake and the surrounding area, to all the survivors of the residential school, St. Joseph's Residential School, as well as to their families in regards to yesterday's announcement regarding the very grim discovery of 93 graves at the former mission. Here at NAFC, we know that this is not yet the end of a truly painful history, and we want to stand ready to support our Indigenous communities during this time. So NAFC calls for a recommitment to the advancing of the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we want to ensure that all of us create a pathway for Indigenous children's well-being. We will be providing some resources for anyone who might need them in the chat. I would like to say thank you and Cook's Chacham. Okay, so as I hope many of you know, the National Association of Friendship Centers have had a very long standing of having women and diverse leaders from the grassroots level all the way up to the national level. And we are so honored to be celebrating our 50th year anniversary this year. It started last September and it's going to go until August. And we are looking forward to a much better 2022. Like Equal Voice, the National Association of Friendship Centers is a nonpartisan national organization, and we work with a network of over 100 local and regional members from coast to coast. Our friendship centers across the country provide culturally relevant and safe community supports to Indigenous people. So that's to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in every region of Canada. And we like to provide a wide range of truly community-driven programs and services, from prenatal programs to lifelong care to serving the different numerous communities. In fact, in the Friendship Center movement, Indigenous women make up to about 70% of the executive directors. And that is at the Friendship Center level and at the provincial and territorial associations across Canada. And that doesn't even include the number of women that serve as volunteers, as staff. They sit on the board of directors. And over the several decades, there have been so many Indigenous women who've not only founded friendship centers, they have built them, they have advanced them all across Canada. But at the same time of building these friendship centers and maintaining them, there's been a high level of engagement with communities, with Indigenous women, Indigenous men, children, elders. You never know who you're going to see at the grassroots level. And honestly, it's really important to have Indigenous women at the political table. So we are extremely proud of our history as a largely Indigenous women-led network. And we are probably the largest Indigenous not-for-profit or civil society network in Canada and around the world. We know what a movement led by women looks like, and we are so happy to be sharing some of the stories of just how a few Indigenous women leaders here today have been supporting Indigenous women in Canada. So on that note, I want to welcome our panelists. So from BC, my dear friend, Anna Thomas. She is the former president of the BC Native Women's Association and the former vice president of the Native Women's Association. And in the fall of 2021, Anna ran in the provincial election. So I want to say hi to Anna. And from Manitoba, we have Sheila North. She is the former Grand Chief of the Manitoba, I hope I can say this right, Kiwetanoi Oimanawak, and MKO is how we usually refer to it. And Sheila was one of the political candidates in the 2018 leadership race for the Assembly of First Nations. And I'm so excited. In the first week of March, she will be releasing her book through chapters. Her book is called My Privilege, My Responsibility. And this shares many of the experiences that have shaped her her role in leadership. So Sheila, good to see you. And from Ontario, just recently met Tania Cameron, who I was so impressed when I did my little cyber stalking of Tania here, but she served as a band counselor when she was 18 years old. And she has also run in 2 federal elections, as well as helped other leaders in their electoral campaigns. And she continues to demonstrate such strong leadership during the pandemic. I hope we get into that a little bit, but I wanted to say hi to Tania. So thank you, ladies. I'm going to ask each of the panelists maybe to be prepared, and let's get started. So I'm going to ask the panel a few questions. I have about 4 or 5 questions, and then I'm hoping that there will be questions coming in from the chat. So if the audience has questions, please put them in the chat, or if you're willing, raise your hand, your virtual hand, and we will have you ask your question to the panel. Question number 1, if we're ready, shake off those nerves. All right, panelists, I'm going to start with you, Anna. Can you please share with us what were some of the key barriers or key successes that you encountered when you decided to run for leadership? And what did you learn from these experiences?
Wow. I think for myself, one of the barriers is that there's no book. There's no book that I could go sign out at a library to say, you know, how as an Indigenous woman, do I run for leadership? How do I run a campaign? How do I break those glass ceilings? How do I kick down those barriers? And so it's been through volunteering, community engagement, networking, and just putting myself in new spaces and places, and acknowledging that I don't have all the answers, and it's okay if I don't know, and it's okay to ask for support and help. There's lots of people that are willing to help you. You just need to ask for it. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to go to Sheila. Sheila, can you tell us what are some key barriers and successes?
Key barriers, I would say, finding a balance between male and female volunteers and helpers, because you don't want to look like you're favoring one gender over the other, and you seem to be criticized more if you only have all female workers. But it doesn't seem to matter when males run. They can have all the females they want, and it looks okay. So I found that a little bit, in introspect after, and I think that was one of them. So optics successes, I think part of it was being able to relate to almost anyone. And I think when we tap into our true and inherent selves as Indigenous people, as a Cree woman, as myself, I was able to give a level of respect to people, and I feel like I was able to get it back because I showed that. And what I learned, that there are differences in male and female leaders and leadership styles, and both are equally important, but sometimes, they're not equally represented, respected, and brought out and utilized.
Right. I want to come back to that. But I want to go to Tania.
So I agree with the comments that Anna shared, and of course Sheila. Just what popped in my mind in terms of barriers, and I think about my run as a candidate for the federal NDP in the Kenora riding. This is Northwestern Ontario. There were a few barriers, and one of them was facing racism within the riding. It's very much a red and white riding, and as much as I appreciated the support from the Indigenous communities, it was difficult to sort of face racism on the doorstep. but I persevered. Like that was a huge thing for me, a big eye opener. Other things would have been, as a candidate, financial resources. Our base supporters are not the richest Canadians, and while I loved every donation, you know, we were asking our base supporters could be a lot of lower income, fixed income people, so that was a bit of a barrier. But I had an excellent campaign manager who could take the smallest budget and do miracles. So I appreciated that. And of course, a solid base of volunteers.
Exactly. I mean, Anna, you were saying how there's no book. And I remember, I think you had 5 or 6 weeks to get your campaign together to run for the NDP seat in your riding. What support did you get?
I was really lucky to have a really good committee that was already existing in the community, and they welcomed me with open arms. But I do remember, Sheila reminded me of, you know, I remember showing up to this committee meeting and thinking, wow, there is I get in Secwepemc, we say, ba'as, what are like grandpas. And I'm sitting in this Zoom meeting going, holy man, like we need to change the look of this committee. And they're actively trying to do it and getting volunteers. But I was sitting there going, holy man. But yeah, it was through, you know, having a good committee that they didn't even know me and were willing to do whatever they could to support me. So, yeah.
Right. Because when you put your name forward in a provincial election, isn't there a certain amount of money you're expected to put in yourself?
For BC, it's $2,000 to get through the vetting process.
Wow.
And so just recently, I know the NDP has started a link, put a link on their page to support Indigenous candidates. But I don't know previously, like I don't think it existed before, but yeah. If you have no money, then what are you going to do?
Exactly. I mean,
and sometimes it's up to the party, right? They may waive that fee for you to get you to, yeah.
You don't know until you ask, right?
Yeah.
Tania, was that the same for you when you were running in the federal election? Did you have to put money forward?
No, we needed signatures, and I think our riding association had to put like $1,000, something like that. So the riding did that.
And how many signatures did you need?
I think for Northern Ontario, we needed maybe 150 signatures from anyone living in the riding. So,
okay, so it wasn't just party members, it could be any community resident.
Anyone 18 and older. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So now how did that differ from when you ran for band council?
For band council, I come from New Saskatchewan First Nation, just north of Kenora. It's a different level of politics. Of course, I did on the doorstep, door knocking and talking to people, hearing what their concerns are. Very similar as a candidate, but of course not as on a big as a scale. And when I ran, I think a lot of people didn't take me seriously, but I gave them my vision. I shared what I believed I can do, what I'm capable of. And at 18, I thought I accomplished quite a bit in terms of volunteer work. And I'm just glad that the community agreed and shared my vision and decided to support me. I ran a total of 6 terms, or I completed 6 terms as a band counselor in my community over the years.
Wow, that's quite the accomplishment. Congratulations. Sheila, I mean, you've been a journalist, you've been a director, you've seen politicians at different levels. When you first ran for the Grand Chief of MKO, how did that differ from when you decided to run for AFN?
Well, of course, the constituents were different, if you want to call them that. It was for MKO, it was the chiefs and the council. So we did have a pretty large base, actually. When you think about it, compared to some other provincial territorial organizations. Some have 60 chiefs that they get voted in by. For MKO in Northern Manitoba, we got voted in by chiefs and council. So the number was close to 187, I think, that we had to appeal to and talk to in a short amount of time. But of course, AFN was the whole country of 633 almost chiefs around there. So you had to go think about it province by province. And the difference, I guess, is being able to understand the different needs and different perspectives that come from each region. Much like that in a smaller scale also in Northern Manitoba, because communities are all different, right? So, yeah.
Now, I remember I was in Vancouver and attended that AFN meeting with the election, and had great hopes, that was going to be the year that we were going to have the female leaders. And we've had a lot of Indigenous women running over the past decades for AFN. So what do you think was the difference at the AFN level? I mean, what made it? I mean, you had some pretty good support across the country. I remember seeing that, but there was also a bit of drama. I remember when I think Bennett went to one of the regions, and I mean,
well, there you go. I think you just answered your own question, what happened there. And I think I better just leave it at that.
Well, that really, really is a shame there.
Something that rhymes with interference.
I mean, AFN's been known to be an old boys club. I mean, and Anna was saying how, she had to be Zooming with a lot of these graybeards, grandfathers and such. And I'm sure Tania was facing, a very patriarchal government, at the band level. And I mean, I think we still see it in politics. So when you decide to run, how do you choose your political support system? Because your family is usually pretty good, but how do you choose your political support system when you're running for an event? I'm going to start with Tania. You've been part of some campaigns. What are you looking for in volunteers?
Well, I know when I actually was on Sheila's campaign team when she ran in 2018. I was so sure she was going to win it. And then I was on current National Chief Roseanne Archibald's team. And we talked about who can we recruit to join the team, what conversations needed to be had. So we just, a small group of us put our heads together. Of course, we looked into Roseanne Archibald's contact list and see who can call who, and it goes out like that, right? So you got to think, well, who would consider, who can we ask, and what skills do we need, and what skills can we ask of people, whether it was fundraising, communications. We had regional reps for each region, so it's a whole lot of planning when you're on a campaign team. What does the budget look like? What do we need? What can we, cut a little slim? I've been on a number of campaign teams, and those seem to be the general, what do we need? Who can we ask? And it's that personal connection with people that's so important in any campaign.
Exactly. Sheila, you had a great campaign group. I think I agree with Tania, and I'm sure you agree with Anna. You weren't lacking for support with your campaign team, but so how did you choose? I mean, that was a national team.
No, we did have an amazing team at that time and during MKO, and I had the pleasure and honor of working with people like Tania and my good friend Jennifer Wood, who is one of the master campaigners in our country. And she has always kept her bridges open and doors open. And I imagine that's every event planner or political campaign manager or volunteer has to do that. And so I had the benefit of their knowledge and their guidance and their connections. And they opened the door, and I was the one that had to walk in and try and solidify support. But they were the ones that were making the introduction. So I value that very much. And I know that I would have never gotten as far as I did without people like Tania and Jennifer and all the people that stepped up to region by region to say that they wanted to help. So yeah, I think good people attract other good people, and not saying I was, but Jennifer and Tania and others brought that with them.
Exactly. So, Anna, I mean, with 5 weeks to go, did your party provide much political support?
Yes, they did. I was lucky, fortunate enough, like I said, to have a really good committee that supported me and a handler that, was right with me through the whole way. I think also in regards to Tania and Sheila's, building and making sure you keep those friends, being mindful of those friends, of the skills that they have, and asking them, hey, can you help me do this? Or building that team. I didn't have time to build a team. It was really quick, but those that I could ask, I asked. And just making sure building those connections and networking wherever I could. And, obviously with the support of my family and friends. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the next question, but I'm kind of curious about two things here. But would you say financial support is important when running a campaign? But on top of that, I'm thinking, when you're looking for support, are you also looking as to who you don't want to support or you don't want to be aligned with? Tania, I'm going to start with you.
I always took people that reached out to help, but a lot of them were strangers and a lot of them were steeped within party politics. So that was new for me. I wasn't previously involved with any political party. My dad was a staunch Orange supporter and encouraged us kids to vote when we got to voting age. But in terms of being leery, I would just because I'm spiritual, I always take on tasks, campaigns with prayer. Who do I want to support? I want to meet with a would-be candidate before I say I'm going to support them. Resources, I want to know that there's no ulterior motive. I don't want to know you're looking for a job after everything is said and done. Those are kind of frank conversations you need to have when you're shaping your team. I really didn't have expectation other than I believe in a candidate's vision. I believe in them as a person and what they can deliver in that leadership capacity, and I would support. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, no, you did. I mean, because we hear so much about some companies trying to use organizations for red washing to make them look good. Are they trying to do that with candidates? I mean, I don't know, Sheila, did that happen to you at all? When you were trying to raise funds? I can't imagine how much your campaign cost going across the country trying to explain to people what your vision was if you became the AFN leader.
I am so thankful and blessed to say that, we did raise enough money to cover pretty much everything. There was a couple of things at the end, but we walked away with no deficit because there was so much support. And I'm sure the amount of money that, provincial candidates that run for mainstream politics or federal might be different. I don't know exactly the amount, but we did have a significant amount of money that we raised. And again, it was thanks to a lot of our connections and doing fundraising and bright minds and tapping into people's talents and being able to organize region by region things that we needed to do and fundraise. So, and the chiefs that were really supportive were also very much involved in raising funds. And so I really appreciated that. And so I think my experience might be a little different because the rules are different when you run for mainstream and when you run for Indigenous organizations. So I have yet to find out the other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Anna, as has been mentioned, you only had a couple of weeks to get your campaign up and running. A lot of campaigns have plans months ahead of time to get, their signage up, who's going to be covering, what meetings. I mean, how did you do it financially? Even gas is expensive.
Well, I ran in right in the hot seat of COVID, and that's when it was still, I guess it wasn't as how it was now, I guess. And so for myself, I personally did not want I didn't want a big campaign to cost a whole bunch of money. My thoughts were that I wanted to show that I could run a good campaign on not even 5% of what my other friends were running their campaign on. And definitely I showed that, I think it came out to like just over $7,000 for our campaign. And considering my friends, I think theirs was over $100 and something thousand maybe combined. It was a lot of money. And to think that they lost numbers when I gained. So nice. I was just really conscious of that. I think I also really think that we need to rethink our target audiences. Like, how are we engaging? Like, are we really gaining people by television anymore? I don't know anybody who's sitting on TV watching a lot of stuff anymore. So that engagement and, oh, sorry, Sheila.
But we're also on the web too, so it's okay.
Right, on the web and on we got to start thinking about all these different ways of engagement and getting in contact with those that are, that were our audience. And so yeah. And what did second?
Yeah, I mean, that has me kind of curious when you're thinking about your audience. So I'm curious, this isn't on my list here, but I'm wondering, what did you have to do in regards to your social media? I mean, for me, there are some things, some jokes that could be taken the wrong way. And you hear about some candidates who said something, like 3, 5, 7 years ago. How does social media affect your campaigns? Sheila?
My rule has always been, if you can't say it in public, don't dare post it on social media in any way. And, I still think that's true. And because things do come back to haunt you, as you know, we all have a footprint. And so I think that we always have to be careful and mindful of that. And that's just part of being, tapping into the integrity that we're all taught to have, right? So for me, though, I think where I faltered in social media was I posted too much, because then my competitors knew exactly where I was, exactly who I talked to. So they just had to follow my footsteps and come and clean up and tap behind me. So I thought about that afterwards, because I everywhere I went, there was the other campaign team. One of the main ones was always right behind me, right talking there to the same people. So hindsight's 2020. I won't do that again if that ever happens again. Or I would advise anyone going in to politics to be mindful of that and to be conscious of that.
Exactly. Anna, I know you're active on social media. I've seen some very positive affirmations, and then you also have your BC's Rock the Boat, which is aimed at, raising awareness around the province as to which bands are doing elections and, any provincial news. How did you have to deal with your social media?
I actually was advised to shut down my Facebook because because of the short time frame, they didn't have time to go through my account and like ask me to delete anything that may, that I may have said. I'm pretty out there. What you see is what you get. And so, yeah, but Facebook was the only account that I had to shut down, put on pause, but all my other handles were good to go. And I think now I'm a little bit more mindful of the things I do say and that I put out there. But I think you just got to be yourself authentically. Just be yourself.
Tania, what recommendations would you have for someone who's thinking of running, but has not been paying attention to, like myself, about social media?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mentor young people, and occasionally I'll get questions about leadership. So I would just say, watch your social media, watch what you're posting, watch what groups you're liking. Be careful, because some groups get hacked and then they change pictures on you that you might have liked. Like it's so sneaky. And if you're, I recommend buy your domain name, even if you're not going to use it, buy it. Buy it for 20 years so no one can take it from you. Because I've seen federal candidates lose their name to a domain, and then people put junk on it. So that's a good recommendation that I think we should do. That's crazy.
And do you know how much a domain name costs?
It's a few bucks. It's not a lot. I have TaniaCameron.com, and I bought it for like 20 years, and it's probably renewal up time in 10 years. And that was recommended to me. I thought it was silly, but yeah, I've seen people's sites or names get taken and put into domains, so it's not a lot. So buy your domain name. and I love social media. So I would not have been able to do so many things in terms of helping during the pandemic, or doing the 2015 First Nations Rock the Vote without social media. That we saw 61% voter turnout on reserve across Canada. We saw 13 on reserve ballots run out of ballots because of First Nations Rock the Vote in 2015. Elections Canada has met with me almost annually to go over their engagement stuff for Indigenous people. So we have power in our vote. So we just need to add more women to the equation.
100% agree. Yes. So I'm curious now. 2 questions again. What do you wish you had known prior to running? And what does your family wish they had known prior to you running? I'm going to start with Tania. When you were 18, what was your family thinking?
Well, First Nations politics, my mom couldn't bear some of the criticism, so she always took it personally. And I just said, Mom, we just got to take a step back. Some people say words in a place of hurt, or they're in their healing path. So for me, that was a really good experience, which led to my jump to federal politics. So I sort of gained a thicker skin with First Nations politics. But I love First Nations politics because you can go head to head, or at least in my community, you can go head to head, but still share a meal at the end of the day, or stand together on the issues that matter. And that's such a big difference than when I see the guy that I ran against, around town. It's just such a big difference. There's always a feeling of family when it does come to res politics. It is a different jump into the mainstream, but I would certainly recommend it.
No, I would. Yeah, I think if that were my daughter out there, yeah, you can't help but have the mama bear come out. But I mean, Anna, you've got a very protective husband. How did he feel when you were being asked to run in the provincial election?
He's pretty supportive of my adventures. I probably wouldn't do half the stuff I've done without his support. He is like the one literally, I'm just thinking about when I ran for president of NWAC. Before everything, my friend looks, she goes, you better call your husband and ask him. And I thought, yeah, because this could be the move. Like I could be moving across the country here. And I didn't even talk to him about it. And I called him and I said, this isn't on the plan. This isn't how I planned it all out. This is, this wasn't what I set out. And he said, you know what, Anna, you only live once, go for it. The opportunity is right now. So do it. So I hung up the phone and said, I guess I'm running. But yeah, he's always been really supportive of me. And I guess some of the things I wish I knew, I wish I knew prior to running was just having a better understanding of the internal part of the party. I didn't really engage too much. I didn't get involved locally, so I wish I'd participated more and just had a better understanding of that. And yeah, and I wish I knew the vetting process. I like I said, I was so new. I just jumped 2 feet in. So yeah.
So I'm going to go over to Sheila next. But I remember listening to former Premier Christy Clark, and she was also talking about how hard it was on her son to hear comments made about her when she was Premier. How was it for your family I mean, not everything's a bed of roses, unfortunately. Sometimes you land on the thorns. Sheila, what's your advice?
Well, my dad, my late father, and my mom, actually, they every day before we went to school, as me and my siblings, they would say every single day, I'm not even exaggerating, don't say anything back to people that say anything to you. But they would say it in Cree, meaning, don't take anything personally. There's always going to be critics. And they taught us that since we were very little. So I learned to, understand possibly, or at least shield myself from any negativity. And because of that, I've been able to, I feel like, have a strong, sane outlook, even in the face of any type of criticism. And I think I also learned that in working in the media, because there's lots of criticism against Indigenous people. When you post any stories about Indigenous people, there's so many. There was a study done a while ago at one of the media outlets on what the general public, what they respond to. And three of the things that at the time, general Canadians responded to and hated and responded with disdain were gays, Muslims, and Indigenous people. And so those three, made people come out and become keyboard warriors and say all kinds of crazy things. And so I learned to ignore them. I still don't read comments about myself on social or on news websites, even where I work here. I mean, yesterday was different because we were announcing that I was the new host of a CBC late night here, and I got mostly good comments. I heard that there was a couple of ones that saying, how come we don't have more Norwegian ones? And so that was the only thing that I let penetrate in my mind. But other than that, I think I got pretty good because my parents taught me to not take anything personally. And then I also separated my family from what I was doing politically. And I was very good at that because I also came from, a life of domestic violence. And unfortunately, one of the coping ways that I coped with it was to shield the rest of my family from ever knowing what was really going on. And it wasn't until I started writing it in my book that I talked about some of these things. So I'm able to compartmentalize myself and my mind from that kind of negative attitudes and words and anything, and letting it into my personal life. And like Tania said, I'm very spiritual as well. And I think we come sort of from the same upbringing on that level. So that helps a lot as well.
Well done. I know sometimes it is just healthy for ourselves to take that break from social media. I think right now, I'm not so bad on social media, but that darn Wordle game, every day, 5 minutes. So, I mean, we're wrapping down to our last 15 or 20 minutes or so, and I want to know not only what the audience has to ask you. I'm going to go with Anna, then Tania, then Sheila. I want to know, would you run again, and what would you do differently? Anna?
I don't know. I just had a big life change. I have two special little people new to my family. And so I don't know, it kind of changes things for me. So I can't answer that right now. And what was your second part of the question?
What would you do differently next time?
What would I do? I would build my own team. Like I've only had 5 weeks. I didn't really have time to build my own team, but that's something definitely I want to do if I ever do run again, is to build my own team with trusted colleagues and friends. I feel like I've built a network and have people around me that definitely could rise to the occasion if all of a sudden I decide, boom, I'm running again. Yeah. And I would worry less. I stressed myself out last time. I needed to chill out.
And that's not easy to do in Kamloops in the summertime.
Yeah, exactly.
Tania, would you run again? And what would you do differently?
Yeah, actually, I've been asked to run by the party for the last couple elections, and I declined. One, I was thinking, well, I want my kids to be older, so they are young adults now, they're moved out. But I'm actually considering taking a step back from partisan politics, because I'm really disturbed by how Elections Canada can't make headway in the Indigenous community. So I'm looking at that. I also have an application for a Senate of Canada appointment, and you have to be nonpartisan for that. So I have that application in. There's 3 vacancies in Ontario. There's no representation in Northern Ontario at all at this current day. So I'm still looking at that as well. But for sure, if anyone's considering a run at party politics, read each platform, read the constitution of each political party. I'm not pushing any political party. Figure out which party's values aligns with your own personal values. If it's municipal elections, think about what values you wish to run on. First Nations politics, what can you bring to the table? So different levels.
Exactly. Sheila, I know you just got announced yesterday. You're now hosting the CTV Manitoba. Is it the 11 o'clock?
CBC, don't get me in trouble here.
Oh, sorry, that was my mistake. Anna had it right, CBC, yes.
Yes.
You're back into journalism, but do you think you'll ever step back into the political realm?
Never say never. And I say that because I didn't think I would ever be a candidate for any type of leadership race. And I guess I should have known, things were lining up that way, but it wasn't my dream. It was my dream to be a journalist. So I am living my dream right now. I'm realizing even more of it because I've always wanted to be a host. So here I am, and it's only day 2. So I can't say right now that I would leave for anything like that. But again, I would never say no, never say never, because that's not possible, I don't think. And I also, one of the reasons why I ran is because I felt a tremendous responsibility to run. And that's what elders were asking me and telling me, that, it was my turn to give back to my community in this way. Even though I was still in journalism and enjoying my career, I got pulled out of it and told to run and thrown in the ring. And so I had to do that. I didn't feel like I had a choice. That's why I named my book, My Privilege, My Responsibility. I had the privilege and the honor and responsibility to stand up and stand for our communities in a certain way like that, and in leadership. And I think that any advice that I would give, though, going forward, I think that we absolutely need more Indigenous women, Indigenous people in politics at all levels, Indigenous, mainstream, everywhere. We need the perspectives, we need the insight of our women. And I think right now it's almost impossible to see that realized unless we start demanding that we designate spots for Indigenous women in Indigenous politics. Say maybe we start pushing for every other year it has to be a woman, because we're not able to do it ourselves right now. It doesn't seem like there's so many factors going on that capable, good, smart women who could be leading our organizations are getting shut out virtually for being women, and that's not right. And in mainstream politics, there should be some designated riding specifically for Indigenous people, where there's large representations, like Northern Ontario, Northern Manitoba. We have large representations of Indigenous people. I think that parties and party politics needs to be brave and say, let's designate these spots. So I think that that would be an interesting move to make.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. Some of the ridings I've looked at where friendship centers are, I've spoken to the political representatives who didn't even know there was a friendship center in their riding. They didn't know what we did, and so once they were aware of it, they're like, oh, that's something we can support. Well, thank you. But why didn't you know about it before? It's a bit of homework that the person running has to do. It doesn't have to be always the Indigenous person saying, hey, don't forget me. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see what questions we might have. Okay, let me start here. I can't believe it's already 7:49 here. Okay, I see one here from Kim. Did you discover you had allies that surprised you when you ran? I'm going to start with Sheila, then Tania, then Anna.
I'm always hopeful, and I'm always cautiously optimistic. So even when people were, told me that they were supporting me, and then they ended up not, you find out later that they didn't. I always approach it as, oh, good, they're on Team Sheila. And then but then the ones that surprised me are the ones that were more guarded and less open with their decisions. And I wish that they would have been more vocal, though, and being able to say that who they're supporting. And so it was a mix of both. I don't know if I'm really, I can say, though, that I was disappointed in some people that really thought they were in your corner, and then in the end you found out they were actually never in your corner. I think that hurt more than anything. And so that was a tough lesson to learn in that department.
I bet. Tania?
Yeah, so when I first ran for the NDP in 2008, again, my dad has always been a staunch supporter of the party, not involved at the party level, but always voted for the NDP. And when we had my campaign kickoff, party members were there, and my dad was asked to say the opening prayer. And he said, I look around this room, he says, and a part of me thinks, where are my people? Like, where are the Indigenous faces in this group? Because it was all non-Indigenous faces. But then he's like, but then when I look at you all, I realize you are my people, right? So we all have this political vision of what we see in our riding and what we hope for in terms of supporting the vulnerable in our society. So that was a beautiful thing, and that really opened my eyes. When in, like, again, I had a really lean budget, didn't get a lot of radio time, didn't get, barely got signs, like everything costs money and you have to count for every dollar. And when I seen the donors list of some of the people that stepped up to my campaign, like these are people that, one, are like little bit of the elite here in Kenora. So when I saw they donated to my campaign, I was really surprised. And another surprise for me was that was the time the Conservatives had the big robocall, so they're putting a lot of money. And when I was asked about it in my campaign, I laughed. I'm like, come and look at my phone bank. These are retired women sitting at my phone bank. They're my robocallers volunteering for me. So I always appreciate the support, even if it's a few hours a day that someone gave me. That was really helped and lifted me up.
Nice. Anna, did you have any allies that came out and surprised you?
Not really. I was just thankful to have people come out on such short notice. Yeah, I was just like, you know, it was such short notice, and for people just to pop out and yeah, just large community support from a lot of people. Actually, no, I guess, yeah, I did have some surprises that I was like, how do you know about me? Because I had a pretty small budget too, but yeah, thankful, definitely super thankful.
I should say, Francine, that I did have, wasn't surprised, but I was happy to have allies support from non-Indigenous people. Even though I ran in Indigenous politics, there was many awesome allies that are still there, and largely from the work that I did with the MMIW. And so a lot of amazing people I met through that, who also became my supporters and still support me in everything I do. So I love allies.
Nice. I'm going to go to Hillary because she's got her hand raised. Hillary, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you. I've been doing a lot of work in decolonization and indigenization in my area. I'm just wondering, I guess, how do you hold people accountable in terms of decolonizing and indigenizing, especially in this field?
I'm going to leave it open to the panel. Who'd like to answer?
So I'm going to say, in 2015, after the First Nations rock the vote, the president of the federal party, the NDP of the day, her name's Rebecca Blakey, went on CBC Politics radio and just said, our party's too white. We need to move away from that. And I was like, thank you. Like, that's why I ran the whole thing nonpartisan, because this was a problem. Indigenous representation or lack of was a problem for all Canadian politics. So I immediately wrote to Elections Canada, I wrote to the Liberal Party, I wrote to the NDP, didn't bother with the other team. And I just said, this is what we need to do. And let's stop looking at it through colonized eyes. You know, Elections Canada hasn't even been looking at Indigenous voter turnout since 2011. That's terrible. But they study every other demographic except Indigenous demographic. What's the other one? So when the party hired me for the last couple of elections, and they have their formula, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it this way because I want to support every Indigenous candidate across the country. I want them to know what they're going to come up against, because I saw it, because I really would have appreciated something like that as I was running. And I'm going to coach and help campaign teams. I'm going to help the candidates. So that was one big thing in terms of taking off the colonized lens and really trying to engage the Indigenous voter.
Nice.
I think also it's like getting your friends and your family involved, like to decolonize these spaces. We need our sisters and our brothers with us. So I've actively tried to get friends to participate, you know, even joining a meeting, and for myself, just committing more to the party, and hopefully, like Tania says, changing that lens and that look that's happening, that voice, raising my voice out there.
Sheila?
I think that decolonization and the act of decolonizing, even yourself and your mind, I think we always have to be mindful that we have to honor the way that people were brought up. I was brought up going to church, and I still value the lessons that I've learned there. And I'm not defending church. I'm not defending Catholic Church, especially because I didn't grow up that way. But all I'm saying is that we all have different perspectives that we've come from. And while we're decolonizing in the era of reconciliation, we have to be mindful, although also to respect people the way that they've been brought up. But at the same time, it doesn't mean we don't tackle, especially things like sexism in our communities. Our Indigenous women are such strong leaders in our own families, in our own communities, and yet we don't see them as much being elected as they need to be. And I've never been about a man versus woman leadership. For me, I think both have a lot of value, but I think that we need to work as a community to make sure that our women are getting elected as well as the men, and that Indigenous people get elected. And wherever you're able to speak up on that, writing papers, hosting Zooms and recruiting and volunteering for campaigns, I think those are the best ways that we can change that.
Exactly. I mean, when I first got introduced to Equal Voice back in, I think it was 2018 by Senator Kim Pate, my goal was just to try and get Indigenous women involved at different levels. I think the first leadership role I had was treasurer for the society for the daycare my kids went to, and that was scary because it was outside of the Indigenous box, and when you step out of those roles, you don't know what to expect. But it wasn't as bad as I thought. I thought it was worse up here than it actually was. And I'm so pleased to see that Equal Voice now has campaign schools that they offer across the country. And we are working, myself and Sherry Anton, to have an Indigenous campaign school here in 2022. So I'm going to try and get through another quick question here. Question, you mentioned volunteering. Are there other ways allies can help support Indigenous women in politics?
I'm going to say, if you don't have time to help your candidate on the doorstep or make those phone calls, then give money. It costs money for every sign, for every flyer you want to get out, for the gas you need to get to the next town to go door knocking. It costs money to pack a lunch like I did. I had a very lean budget. But give, even if it's, I can only give you $100. Yeah, I could only give you $20. That $20 could be 2 signs right there. It doesn't seem like a lot, but I tell you, every dollar counts. And then talk to your friends, talk to your family members, you get one person talking about you, you might get another 5 people talking to their circles. It goes out. Share their social media posts, build them up on your social medias, get the traction going to the candidate. Reach out to the candidate, let her know you're going to support them any way you can. And even if it's, can you come and watch the phones for an hour? Can you go do it? But again, money is easy to give to, so that's always appreciated.
That's true.
I would agree with Tania. Also, just showing up at the campaign office, calling the campaign manager or their campaign manager, and of course, money is always nice too. Like Tania says, it does cost money for pamphlets, but and encouraging your friends to participate and learn about the electoral system. Like Francine, you'd mentioned earlier about the BC First Nations Rock the Vote page. I've been really passionate about that for years and encouraging friends and family and community members to learn about voting and the whole system, right? So yeah, get out there and learn.
I would agree with all of that, and also do like a inventory of what you would need and tap into the creativity of young people, especially who know how to do social media. Guaranteed people like Jagmeet Singh didn't learn how to do TikTok on his own, someone to teach him. So I think the rest of us can do that as well, and tap into the young people that know how to do social media. And unfortunately, even if you don't like social media, it is the way of the world now. So we all have to get used to it, and we all have to use it in some way. And even the oldest leaders that you can think of, they could probably benefit from social media now, because that's the way we are all communicating. Look at us right here. We're communicating through social media at the moment. How else could we have communicated for all of this discussion across Canada in another way, in the old way, by phone, having a party line, and that's not as effective. So yeah, I think we all have to get used to that. And allies have different skill sets, and finding a way to tap into them and understanding where their skill sets are at would give you a good inventory of where you can utilize allies and volunteers.
Exactly. Well, there are still so many more questions. So obviously, this is something we need to do again at a later date. I think we have a lot of young people and older people like myself. I wouldn't mind considering running for a position at some point. And I think how lucky I am, that I can reach out to my brothers and sisters, such as you three, and ask for your advice. I think that's the best part of being in the Indigenous community, is that you're just a couple cousins over from knowing somebody who's done something or who can help you. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time tonight, for sharing your experiences, for running in different elections, and giving, such solid feedback as to what we might encounter if we decide to run for some sort of electoral leadership role. So on that note, I am going to say Cook's Chacham and then pass the hosting duties back over to Esther at Equal Voice so we can do the draws for the audience. Thank you very much.